Welcome in to CBS News 24/7. I'm Mugo Digwe. A live look now inside the White House, where Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is expected to step to the podium shortly and give an update. Those remarks not slated to start until after Vice President J.D. Vance delivers his speech to the Marine Corps at Quantico. We expect that to start any moment now. But right now, the White House is dealing with mounting fallout from reporting in The Atlantic. It alleges its editor-in-chief was added to a Signal group chat with Trump administration members discussing strikes in Yemen. Editors from The Atlantic decided to release these messages after the White House downplayed the importance of these texts just yesterday. They concluded the public can reach its own decision after reading the conversations. And you can see at the top of the text chain, Michael Waltz added Jeffrey Goldberg to the group named Houthi PC Small Group. Messages for that chain were set to erase after 1 week. Waltz also outlined the goals for the group, saying, quote, establishing a principles group for coordination on Houthis, particularly over the next 72 hours. Further into that chain, Pete Hegseth sent a team update. That update outlines timing for the mission and weapons being used, including F-18s and strike drones. And finally, you can see all 19 members of this chat, including Goldberg. Other names are John Ratcliffe, Susie Wiles, J.D. Vance, and Steve Witkoff. The White House quickly doubled down on its messaging just minutes after the Atlantic article was published out online. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said this in a social media post. The Atlantic has conceded these were not war plans. This entire story was another hoax written by a Trump hater who is well known for his sensationalist spin. CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata joins us now from the Pentagon. Charlie, good to see you again today. Are we getting a better picture of the security risk here?
Mugo, yes and no. We're getting a clearer picture of exactly what was discussed. It's still murky as far as the classification of the information that was distributed, who had the authority to declassify that, what sort of mechanism is in place. But I can tell you, when this story broke yesterday, I was interested by the account that he said there was more to share that he wasn't going to share because it would have raised national security questions. And that's what struck me today. So you've got the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, right? He's in a very small group of people who would have known that initial information. And this is where it gets granular, right? So on that Signal group chat, he sent out 31 minutes before the launch of the first U.S. jet fighters, and those were launched from, those are F-18s, they were launched from the deck of the Harry S. Truman, and more than 2 hours before a strike on what was referred to in that chat as a terrorist target. So this is a specific target at his location. Had this fallen into the hands of the Houthis, or perhaps the Russians who would have given the information to the Houthis, they would have had more than enough time to prepare for it. They have got air defense systems that are able to take down Reaper drones, fly at very high levels. They certainly would have tried to take aim at F-18s if they had the chance. They have, surface-to-air capabilities to target U.S. warplanes and their pilots. So, as he says in the article, it could have been catastrophic. And that's the damning part of these new revelations. And that's the reason Goldberg originally gave for not releasing that information. But from what I've seen, there's a TikTok. There's exact timings, exact weapons packages, exact strike packages, F-18s, Tomahawk cruise missiles, drones that were launched and when, and vaguely what they were targeting. So this information, and I've been running around this building to say, what's going on. And the military likes an acronym. People say, what's the mood there? WTF is what I'm getting from most people. So, and that's the truth. So in a normal environment, that information, strike packages or target packages, would have been close hold, even as it was underway and for a time afterward. But then it raises the question, to what degree of authority or is a mechanism in place? Because if Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says it was not classified, he is kind of the decider. So that's where we are right now. So you asked me to clear things up. I cleared that part up. The other part's a bit more murky.
Of course. Thanks for the laugh there, by the way. But what else stood out to you from the latest Signal messages that were released this morning? Anything else?
Yeah. What stood out to me is he also said, Hegseth Defense Secretary Hegseth said that it was OPSEC clean. What was interesting about that is that was the first sort of acknowledgement that the information that he was sharing would have needed to have operational security. So I don't know if he thought, well, I'm going to add that to it just in case people are wondering. The other thing that is that stood out to me here, when you see that long list of individuals, you know, they have what's called high side and low side, where they have communications. And it strikes me that nobody inside that group would have looked at that detailed information about strike packages and weapon systems and timings and would have thought, guys, are we okay talking about this here? You know, maybe we should move this to a more classified or a more secure environment. But they're you know, in a manner of speaking, there didn't seem to be any grown-ups in the room. If I had come across that information, the same as the Atlantic, I would have held that back. I would have gone to intelligence people, as they did in the community, and say, look, I have this. I mean, one of the things he pointed out was, you know, he's sort of been raked over the coals, and that was one of the reasons he went to them and said, look, so the statements by Hegseth, Gabbard, Ratcliffe, and Trump, combined with the assertions made by numerous administration officials that we were lying about the context, have led us to believe people should see the text and reach their own conclusions.
Wow. Charlie D'Agata, thank you so much for your insight today, really explaining everything in a way that makes sense. Appreciate it. All right, let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman for more on this. We have our eyes in Quantico. Vice President J.D. Vance expected to speak any minute now. Do we expect J.D. Vance to address all of this, Willie?
Hey there, Mugo. Good to be with you. Well, the vice president certainly has the opportunity to speak before cameras there when he does show up for this event at Marine Base, Ada Marine Base in Quantico. To address the situation, I'll point out that earlier today in a Truth Social post, he essentially blasted the journalist behind this Atlantic report. He said it's very clear Goldberg oversold what he had. And then he went on to talk about the cover of the CIA agent that was named, that the director Ratcliffe named as his chief of staff. But one thing I also want to point out is that there has been a push to not only blast the Atlantic, but to also blast Jeffrey Goldberg. There has really been a concerted effort amongst Trump administration officials in public statements before cameras and interviews, but also in those social media posts to criticize the Atlantic, to say that somehow Jeffrey Goldberg is a person who is criticizing Trump, that the Atlantic somehow isn't necessarily a organization that Americans should trust, and we'll certainly see those questions posed before the press secretary as she's set to give that briefing, which should be starting any moment now, Mugo.
Yes, exactly, Willie. We know that briefing is expected to start shortly. What are you expecting there? Clearly, Caroline Leavitt posted on social media, basically doubling down, saying this was no big deal whatsoever. Are we expecting the same response when reporters talk to her today?
Yeah, I certainly think you can expect that response. That's in fact what we saw on social media posted from the press secretary. We saw the president yesterday when he was asked about the situation, talking about essentially saying that it wasn't necessarily a big deal. Now, Michael Waltz himself did admit in a Fox News interview to take ownership for this Signal chat thread in which he inadvertently added a journalist. The White House didn't dispute the veracity of the conversation. So clearly there are a lot of questions as to whether or not the president not only has continued confidence in his national security advisor, which he has expressed which other administration officials have expressed as well, but also whether or not anyone will be fired for this situation, for what really could be only to be described as a public blunder in terms of this information being in the hands of someone who normally is not privy to classified or sensitive type of operational information about strikes on an enemy in a foreign land. So that's kind of to sum up the questions that I would have if I were in the briefing, but certainly some of those questions will be put before the press secretary in moments from now.
All right, Willie James Inman, thank you so much for joining us on the stream today. Turning our monitors over to Capitol Hill, the House Intelligence Committee taking a break now after grilling Trump cabinet members during its annual global threats hearings. Top of mind for Democrats, that Signal group chat. Members of that chat appeared before the committee, including Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe. Meanwhile, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had this to say on the chamber floor just moments ago. Let's listen.
So, Mr. President, the more we learn about the unsecure text exchange of sensitive military operations, the more questions we have about how such an egregious breach of military intelligence occurred in the first place. What the Atlantic released today is confounding and extremely disturbing to any American who worries about our national security and our safety. It is appalling. Worst of all, it confirms our darkest assumptions about mishandling of sensitive military operations. So the release of this letter was extremely important, but many outstanding questions are not answered by this letter's release. So we need the full text exchange released by the administration. This morning's report reinforces the need for immediate answers, transparency, and accountability from President Trump, Secretary Hegseth, and all the others who were involved.
Senate Democratic leaders also sent a letter to the White House. It stated in part, you have long advocated for accountability and transparency in the government, particularly as it relates to the handling of classified information, national security, and the safety of American service members. As such, it is imperative that you address this breach with the seriousness and diligence that it demands. Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. And as we mentioned, that hearing is now on break, Nicole. But what are you hearing in the halls of Congress about this Signal chat following these testimonies?
Obviously, there continues to be a lot of concern about what happened here. You know, both Democrats and Republicans acknowledge it was a mistake, but many congressional Republicans feel it's time to move the page, turn the page, move on, and that this was something that was inadvertent that ultimately didn't impact those airstrikes in Yemen. Democrats, on the other hand, are more outraged. They have been calling for congressional investigations, many now calling on Secretary Hegseth and the NSA advisor Mike Waltz to resign, and that now includes Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. He just wrapped a presser on another matter, but I asked him if he agrees with Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who wrote the president just yesterday saying that Hegseth should be fired immediately. He said that he does agree with the leader. So, of course, these are the two highest-ranking Democrats here in the Congress calling on the defense secretary to resign. Now, whether or not that materializes obviously remains to be seen. We know the administration and those officials who testified here on Capitol Hill today defended their actions, but it certainly is raising the pressure on these officials. I would note that the Senate Armed Services Committee Chair Roger Wicker, a Republican, says that he does plan to send a letter to the administration along with his Democratic counterpart asking for an Inspector General review of this incident. So again, they can try to get to the bottom of what happened here.
And Nicole, that's sort of my next question here, because do Democrats even have any chance of seeing an investigation into this chat, given that they currently stand as the minority in both chambers?
Well, I think it's fair to say there are some that are already underway. We know, for instance, the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have called for an investigation and have decided to open one up in terms of their limited role as the ranking members on that panel. But they have asked the administration to preserve records related to this chat. And again, with respect over here in the Senate and the Senate Armed Services Committee, they certainly are probing this further. So there are efforts underway again to try to extrapolate more information beyond what was reported this morning in the Atlantic so that members can be briefed and get more information from the administration on this.
Nicole Killian, thank you so much for your time. A live look at the White House. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt just stepped up to the podium moments ago to give an update, and we are watching out for what she will have to say on the fallout from the Atlantic articles. The U.S. Supreme Court is upholding Biden-era regulations on hard-to-trace weapons known as ghost guns. The 7-2 High Court ruling means people who want to buy kits for homemade weapons must go through background check requirements and age verifications, and also require serial numbers on ghost gun parts, making it possible for police to trace them if used in a crime. President Trump has been slamming the judge assigned to the legal battle over deportation flights. U.S. District Judge James Boasberg has been pushing back against the use of a wartime act to deport hundreds of Venezuelan migrants. Now it turns out Judge Boasberg has actually been assigned to another high-profile case, this one surrounding the fallout from the signal messages in the Atlantic article, which we've been talking about all day, right? Let's bring in CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen. Jake, good to see you today. This is quite a twist here. The first time I heard this, I thought, oh my goodness, this poor guy, another case, and he's been getting death threats and a bunch of accusations from the Trump administration. So what was your reaction to this?
The same as yours. And Judge Boasberg, who still is in the middle of this legal argument until we get some kind of circuit court decision, potentially either getting rid of the temporary restraining order that Judge Boasberg put on the deportation of these alleged Tren de Aragua gang members, or it's very well possible that they would allow Judge Boasberg to continue the road that he's on, which is to find more answers from the government, especially in what steps they are taking to give rights and due process to these people who have been deported and who would be deported if the order were lifted. Judge Boasberg was assigned to a case, and again, this selection process is random. He was assigned to a case in American Oversight versus Hegseth, which is a new lawsuit by a left-leaning watchdog group that has sued the Trump administration, including Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and CIA Director John Ratcliffe, over this Signalgate issue, claiming that there's a violation of the Federal Records Act, and that because some of the messages in that chat, based on the Atlantic's reporting, were set to self-destruct after a certain number of days, that the administration, because they were having these official conversations that were not on classified servers, that there is a violation of and a destruction of real government documents. This group claims that the Trump administration is in violation of that. We'll see what comes out of it, but certainly just another high-profile case down here in Washington, D.C., under now a high-profile judge who really had kept his name out of the news for a while after those January 6 cases kind of had run through his courtroom, and now he's back with two pressing issues. I'm sure that the president will respond to this in short order.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Jake, let's go back to the battle over the deportation flights. The DOJ has been pushing back against the judge's orders. In a court filing, Attorney General Pam Bondi and top DOJ officials argue the removals were legal and safeguarded Americans against members of a foreign terrorist organization. So, Jake, the question here is, what options does the judge now have?
Well, after the Department of Justice's filing last night, the plaintiffs in this case, which is the ACLU, have until Friday to counter the government's argument that it did not break Judge Boasberg's order in not turning those two planes around. The ACLU has made no small order of this, basically calling it a rebuke of the judge and illegal. They will likely put all of this into a longer court filing due Friday. From there, Judge Boasberg has a couple of options, but the most potentially important and significant of this would be to motion and to move to find the government in contempt of his order. But without, as we saw on Monday night, without any details on these flights of who was on them specifically, what time did the planes take off, when were the migrants and alleged gang members loaded on. The big chunk of that timeline is missing. Judge Boasberg pledged in court on Friday to get to the bottom of that. So he's got a couple of different paths to go down. But until the circuit court rules, Judge Boasberg is going to continue asking the government and the ACLU for more information, including just, quite frankly, how many people is the ACLU representing in this case. They said they actually didn't know how many and where all of the potential people they are representing in blocking these deportations are located.
Wow. Okay, Jake, in line with deportations here, we've learned a Tufts University grad student is the latest to be taken into custody by ICE. What do we know about this case?
Right. We know that she was here on an international student visa and that she was, according to social media footage that our team and this woman's attorney have verified, that there was a confrontation as she was walking on the phone. Some agents from Homeland Security or another federal law enforcement group went up to her and arrested her. This is very similar to all the cases that we've seen around the country, both in Columbia University, at Tufts. This student had signed a op-ed in the student newspaper calling for the university, Tufts University, to acknowledge that there's a genocide going on in Gaza by the Israeli government. And she had been part of an online group of names, and especially students and academics, who had spoken out against this, that it seems like the administration has, at least in some theory, followed that list. A judge did block her removal from the state of Massachusetts, but she is still being detained by federal law enforcement, and her attorney said they're not exactly sure where she is being held in Massachusetts right now. So same kind of process where judges have immediately blocked the deportations of many of these individuals and students and fellows at universities, but they're not being released from custody, and lawyers have had to fight to get more details about where their clients are even being held.
Wow. Jake Rosen, thank you so much for your time today. Right now, we are watching White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt answering questions from the press, some on that leaked group chat top security leaders were a part of, discussing plans to attack targets in Yemen. CBS News correspondent Chanel Call has been listening to the briefing. Chanel, what can you tell us?
All right, a couple of big takeaways so far from this briefing, Mugo. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says President Trump is going to make an announcement this afternoon at 4 o'clock to announce tariffs on the auto industry. So we'll keep a close eye on that later today. And of course, on the issue of Signalgate, Leavitt again doubled down on her messaging that the mission was successful in Yemen this weekend, and also says the texts in that group chat on Signal did not contain any war plans and did not contain any classified information. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt taking questions right now. Let's watch live.
Secretary of Defense's statement he put out this morning. There were various reasons he listed, things that were not included in that messaging thread, that were not classified. And again, going back to the American public, do you trust the Secretary of Defense, who was nominated for this role, voted by the United States Senate into this role, who has served in combat, honorably served our nation in uniform? Or do you trust Jeffrey Goldberg, who is a registered Democrat and an anti-Trump sensationalist reporter? This president and this national security team are putting our national security and the American people first. We are restoring American strength around the world, and the results of this operation speak for themselves.
Putting aside Jeffrey Goldberg, though, just for American service members who are going to have to carry out these missions in the future, what I guess the message that's coming from the response to all this that we're hearing is that nothing sensitive happened, and I guess the logical conclusion of that is that if these messages had gone out publicly prior to the launch, that wouldn't have been a risk to service members. I don't know that they're comfortable with that. So can you explain, had these messages been published, would the plans have moved forward? Would the launch have still taken off?
What I can tell you is that the President, as the Commander-in-Chief of our United States Armed Forces, and Secretary Pete Hegseth, who is an incredible man and a warfighter himself, take the lives of our American service members with the utmost responsibility, and they would never do anything intentionally to put their lives at risk. And again, they are working hard on that every single day, and we are protecting our service members while also restoring peace throughout this globe. It's something the previous administration has not done. And I would just add one more point. We are not going to be lectured about national security and American troops by Democrats and the mainstream media who turned the other cheek when the Biden administration, because of their incompetence, left 13 service members dead in Afghanistan, and not a single person in the previous administration was held accountable for that botched withdrawal. Joe Biden said, in fact, it was a great operation. That is despicable. It's unacceptable to this president and this Secretary of Defense. The National Security Advisor has taken responsibility for this inadvertent number being added to the messaging thread. But above all, we take the lives of our troops, safety, security, prosperity around the globe with the utmost seriousness.
Goldberg's intentions, do you believe that he would release that to embarrass the administration ahead of the worldwide threats?
Jennifer, go ahead.
Given what you've said about the president's trust in his national security team, can you say definitively that no one will lose their jobs no one will lose their job at all because of this signal situation.
What I can say definitively is what I just spoke to the president about, and he continues to have confidence in his national security team.
One more. Can I ask one more, Karen? On the targets in Yemen on March 15th, can you say were 100% of the targets that were planned for March 15th, were they all destroyed? Because that would be an indication if some of them were moved or they were not all hit, that maybe perhaps some of the enemies were able to get some of the information in that signals channel.
What I can say about the operation is what the Department of Defense has put out there. I would refer to them for any further operational details. But there have been more than 100 strikes conducted against Houthi targets, and they have hit key Houthi leaders, air defense systems, command and control nodes, headquarters, weapons manufacturing and storage facilities, and these operations will continue until the freedom of navigation in our seas is restored and U.S. shipping can safely transmit without the fear of attack. And again, we believe that this has been a very successful operation thus far, and it will continue until this administration feels it no longer has to, and these terrorists have been taken out, which again is something previous administration should have done, but they didn't, and now we've inherited this crisis. Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. I'd like to clarify something about the investigation and also ask about some conservative commentary. On the investigation, Mike Waltz said last night that he had spoken to Elon Musk about figuring out how Jeffrey Goldberg's number got in his phone. You mentioned the NSC and the White House counsel's office investigating. Can you just clarify who is investigating, who's leading that, and also Dave Portnoy, who endorsed President Trump, said today that he thinks that Mike Waltz should leave. Could you respond to that?
Sure. Great respect for Dave Portnoy, but I just answered that previous question from Jennifer. As for your original question about who's looking into the messaging thread, the National Security Council, the White House counsel's office, and also, yes, Elon Musk's team. Elon Musk has offered to put his technical experts on this to figure out how this number was inadvertently added to the chat. Again, to take responsibility and ensure this can never happen again.
I have two questions. One on a follow-up on something you just said. But since we have these messages released, and you said that the president has now personally reviewed them, at the chat at one point, Pete Hegseth wrote 14-15 strike drones on target, and in all caps he said, "This is when the first bombs will definitely drop." Does the president feel that he was misled by his national security advisors, whoever it was that told him there was no classified information in there, now that he's seen these messages?
I've now been asked and answered this question 3 times by the both of you, and I've given you my answer. The president feels the same today as he did yesterday.
Okay.
Philip.
And on my follow-up on what you had just said.
Go ahead, Philip. Caitlin, I'm not taking your follow-up.
I have a follow-up on something you just said, though, Caroline. That's
Caitlin,
regarding
I'm not
Jeffrey
taking
Goldberg.
your follow-up. Philip, go ahead. I have called on you.
The vice president seemed to express some frustration that Europe wasn't doing more to police waterways in their backyard, noting in that signal thread that 40% of European trade goes through the Suez Canal. Does the president share that opinion and frustration? And then going forward, should the Europeans be responsible for policing that waterway?
Well, the president was asked this question yesterday by the pool in the cabinet room, and he answered this question. He said yes, he believes that Europe has been, as the vice president put it, freeloading on the backs of American taxpayers and off the backs of the United States of America, and he wants to ensure that Europe pays their fair share. He's always been very honest and upfront about that, and I think the vice president shares those concerns with him as well.
And then one more.
Sure.
Enlisted soldiers, sailors, and Marines would face consequences if they shared this type of information inadvertently with a reporter. Can you tell us more why the president is so willing to give Mike Waltz a mulligan here?
Again, I have now been asked and answered the same question using different language multiple times. If anybody has another question, there's a lot of different things going on in the world. We have tariffs possibly being implemented later today. The president is going to talk about that at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Sure.
Okay, thank you for taking my question. I wanted to first and foremost thank the administration for the election integrity executive order, because so many journalists for 4 years were banned from talking about this very subject. So thank you to the administration for that. My question is, yesterday President Trump, when signing the order, said that there is more to come when it comes to election integrity. Would that include same-day voting and hand-counted paper ballots? And why are Democrats so against election integrity measures like like obviously proof of citizenship when it comes to voting in a United States election?
Well, it's a very good question. You'll have to ask the Democrats why they're against so many common sense things, not just mandating voter ID. Why are they against men and women's sports? Why are they against deporting foreign terrorists from American soil who have been designated a foreign terrorist organization? I'm referring to Tren de Aragua. As for the election integrity executive order that the president signed yesterday, this is in an effort to restore trust in American elections. There were more than 10 steps taken, 10 executive actions taken throughout this one order. It directs the department, or the Attorney General rather, in Homeland Security to prevent non-citizens from any involvement in administering elections. There's also another host of actions. We can provide the fact sheet for you, but it's a very strong election integrity executive order, and the president would also like to see Congress do something about this very important issue.
About Judge Boasberg.
Sure, go ahead.
Caroline, the Republicans and Democrats alike have been expressing some concern about the frequency with which senior Trump officials have been using the Signal app. Has there been discussion, or will there be a review about how often they use Signal, and if you could explain to us how they might be considering other applications to get away from something like this happening again?
Sure. Well, again, first of all, Signal has been an approved app for government use. It's an encrypted app, and as I said, it's the most safe and efficient way of communicating, especially when people can't be in a skiff or inside a room physically together. I think, as the president said yesterday, he wishes that everybody could be in the room, and it's our goal to ensure that everybody can be. But again, no classified information was discussed in this chat, and any time classified information is discussed amongst high-level officials across this administration, secure lines of communication are used, including, by the way, our special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who I understand the Wall Street Journal erroneously reported that he was on this Signal chat on a personal device while in Moscow. That is absolutely false. Steve Witkoff did not have his personal device, nor did he have his government device with him. He was given a classified, protected server by the United States government, and he was very careful about his communications when he was in Russia. So rest assured to the American public, this administration is taking every precaution when it comes to protecting our national security. And that's why the American people reelected this president, because they know that our national security is in good hands with the President of the United States. Speaking of the Vice President, I understand he's going to be speaking any moment now. I would hate to counter-program the Vice President of the United States. You'll also hear from the President at 3 o'clock. He will be honoring women's history at the Women's History Month celebration. We have a lot of great women across our cabinet who will be in attendance, so we'll see you all there. And then you'll also hear from the President again at 4 o'clock when he talks about tariffs. So plenty of time for more questions. Sorry it's a bit shorter today, guys. We'll see you later.
All right, let's bring back Chanel Call here to talk more about what we just heard from this White House press briefing. I think what stood out to me is Caroline Leavitt basically saying, hey, you know what? The Trump administration will never intentionally put the lives of service members in danger. It almost sounds like admitting that this was a mistake, which they still wouldn't just come out and say it.
Well, Mugo, selective wording here from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. She was certainly peppered with questions from reporters this hour about what we're now calling Signalgate. Again, she hammered down the message that this mission was successful in Yemen. And again, she said the chat did not contain war plans and still maintains the information in that chat wasn't classified. She did, though, seem to sort of dodge questions about whether military members would have been put at greater risk if the information in that chat was perhaps leaked to an adversary. As for who is leading the charge into how all this happened, Leavitt was asked about that. She says the National Security Council is now looking into this. And Mugo, notably, she also added that Elon Musk's team is now looking into how that journalist's phone number was added into that Signal chat.
Thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it. So we are going to bring in Sam Vinograd now to talk more about the press briefing we just heard here. Sam, are you there? Oh, you are.
I am,
I think
yes.
the big question for me here is we keep saying or hearing from the Trump administration that this was not classified information. What is your take?
Well, there's an easy way to find out, and we can debate whether it was, whether it wasn't. Again, in my experience, any operational plans about a military strike would most certainly be classified, particularly before the military strike occurred. But the bottom line is that the operational plan for those strikes was likely generated by the Pentagon. It had a classification on it when the plan was generated. And if we wanted to really follow the book here, an investigation would ensue that would look at that original content and look at that original classification heading. And then we would all know whether this was or was not classified material. Instead, we are dealing with various officials saying that it wasn't classified and telling us to believe them when we actually have a paper trail to look at.
Yeah, and what do you think, from your experience, what do you think should be the next step here? You think an investigation should happen?
I think anytime there is a possible inadvertent or knowing disclosure of potentially classified information, we have trained professionals at the Federal Bureau of Investigation that can look into what happened, whether there was malign intent, and whether there was, in fact, some kind of unauthorized disclosure. From there are various steps that can ensue, but I do think an investigation would be very helpful in the first instance to find out if anybody broke the law, but second, to help shed light on any vulnerabilities that this disclosure may have caused so that we can ensure there's no unintended consequences and work to ensure that this kind of behavior doesn't happen again.
And Sam, what, if anything, are you hearing from the Pentagon on this?
I haven't heard much from the Pentagon other than consistent messaging with what the White House is saying, which is basically nothing to see here. And the White House is saying nothing to see here, but at the same time, just acknowledge that there is an investigation, not led by the FBI, but instead led by DOJ, into how a journalist was added to the Signal chain rather than into whether there was a disclosure of classified information. And as a security professional, my biggest concern is that these unauthorized disclosures of classified information or sensitive information can have impacts on national security. And even these text messages just now being public and Jeffrey Goldberg having had access to them means that the whole world now has eyes on how senior government officials were discussing operational and policy moves. It's not like we have that kind of insight into how the Kremlin or the People's Republic of China is debating things. So already there has been a national security impact here.
And would you say this feels somehow like a double standard? Because just a few years ago, there was Republicans talking over and over again about Hillary Clinton and her emails. And now this happens, and it seems like the Trump administration just wants to sweep it all away and ignore it.
I think that as a security professional, I am always focused whenever there's a potential misuse of personal devices or government devices or any potential unauthorized disclosure. I just want to get to the facts and try to mitigate any unintended consequences. It certainly does appear to be a double standard as it pertains to calls for an investigation into an unauthorized disclosure or potential misuse of devices. But that's where I hope we can turn back to process and hope that trained professionals can launch an investigation into what occurred here rather than making this a political football.
Yes, and hopefully that all comes to fruition. CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd, thank you so much for joining us on the stream today. Vice President J.D. Vance is giving an address at Quantico right now. Stay with us right here on CBS News 24/7. A live look now at Portland and Seattle. There is a threat of severe weather in the Pacific Northwest today that could bring in strong winds, hail, and even a chance of tornadoes, Jess.
Yeah,
what?
A 5% chance right now. That's what they're saying. And to add to that, I mean, this is going to impact about 7 million people just up in the Pacific Northwest. At the same time, they were just dealing with record-breaking numbers yesterday.
Wow.
It was hot yesterday throughout the West Coast, and now we're seeing that active weather come. So here's what's happening for us. We head over to the map all the way up in areas like Seattle. Portland, Oregon is another good example. We're seeing storms starting to sweep in from offshore. This will just cusp the northern portion of California, but the bulk of this rain, anywhere up to around 9 inches, will impact Washington all throughout the coastline of Oregon. And at the same time, we're also keeping a very close eye on the storms that will start impacting the south right around the corner. But let's head back to the Pacific Northwest behind me. I'm going to pull this up just to kind of time this storm out for you. Heading into the evening hours tonight, we're gearing up for some heavy rain right around the corner. This area of low pressure lingers just offshore, pushing in plenty of moisture all throughout Oregon, Washington, and Northern California too. The Cascades all the way down to the Sierra will see plenty of snow at the exact same time as we head into this weekend's forecast. Now, that slight risk that you see in that yellow color stretching from Seattle all the way down into Portland, that's where we could see tornado activity, hail, Thunderstorms widespread throughout these areas. And to add to that, this is around the same time that we're also dealing with temperatures still well above average. I mean, today, Portland, Oregon will hit 76 degrees, which honestly, on a normal day, sounds great, right? This is well above average for this time of year. That area of high pressure warmed all the west coast up, bringing in above average temperatures. So we're going from hot temperatures straight into thunderstorm activity.
Yeah, you
right
get the heat,
corner.
and then now you got something even worse coming.
Two big weather events happening at the same week.
Oh my gosh. All right, Jess, thank you.
Of course.
Turning now to Connecticut, where a woman accused of holding her stepson captive for more than 20 years is expected to plead not guilty. Police say the 32-year-old man was starved, abused, and locked in a small room for most of his life. He was just 69 pounds when he was rescued, and he claims his father knew about the treatment. But Kimberly Sullivan was the one in charge. Here's the victim's half-sister outside the courthouse today.
I haven't really been told anything. This is an ongoing investigation and they can't really say too much. I just know that she's a monster. I think that really the abuse ramped up after his dad died and he either was going to die in the fire or he was going to get saved. Either way, he'd be out.
Meanwhile, Sullivan's attorney is reminding the public that his client is presumed innocent until proven guilty.
The last couple of weeks, you said that she's denying the allegations and that she's shocked by the allegations. Do you stand by that?
100%.
If that's the case, then how do you explain her stepson being 68 pounds and no one on the planet besides a couple of people seeing him for the last 20 years?
Well, the great thing about this system is we don't have to explain it. The state has made allegations, and the state has to prove those allegations in court. Those allegations are serious, but those allegations are made by one person. I understand the whole world has jumped on those allegations and has already convicted my client. But the good thing about America is that's not how we work. She's presumed innocent until proven otherwise in court. So the burden rests on the state to prove these allegations. Right now, they're just allegations. And I'm sorry that she's been convicted worldwide and everyone wants to proceed to a lynching. But we have a system. She has rights, the same rights that everyone else has, and we intend on protecting those rights and her having her day in court.
She's a stepmother. How do you explain the condition of her stepson being 68 pounds?
Like I said, it's not my job to explain the condition of the stepson. It's on the state to prove these allegations in court. My client has a right to remain silent. She has a presumption of innocence, and we're going to protect those rights.
And his client, Kimberly Sullivan, will be back in court on Friday. We'll be right back. Stay with us here on CBS News 24/7. Right now, there is a desperate battle to get flames under control in South Korea, which has seen its worst wildfires in decades. The wind-driven fires have killed at least 24 people and forced tens of thousands of households to evacuate in the southeastern part of the country. Now, one of those lives lost, a helicopter pilot who crashed while trying to contain the fires. The flames have consumed more than 67 square miles so far, destroying at least 200 buildings. Everything from homes to factories have been razed. One of the biggest losses, an ancient Buddhist temple that's more than 1,300 years old. That temple has been reduced to rubble, along with a stone Buddha statue inside that was believed to be from the 8th century. Wow. The wind continues to fuel the flames. The firefighters are hoping a bit of rain tomorrow will help them out. The area around San Antonio, got some intense hail earlier this week. And if any of you are wondering just how much damage it can cause, one driver found out the hard way.
My car is completely busted up. I've got water coming in. This is my windshield. The road, there's an accident. We've got glass everywhere. Yeah, we got 911 called and they're coming.
Look at that car. That woman was driving in the city of Kerrville, about 60 miles outside of San Antonio, when golf ball-sized hail rained down on her car, smashing her sunroof and windshield and leaving behind lots of scratches there. Wow. Good idea to stay inside that car at least. And check out this. Wow. Very goodness gracious, a very close call for a family dog caught on camera in Gary, Indiana. A man says his son rushed to bring that puppy inside the house just seconds before a tornado touched down and ripped up that backyard, destroying the dog's cage and a shed. Luckily, they were all safe. Thank God for that. That tornado hit last week, and at one point, winds were as strong as 110 miles per hour. That was so lucky there. Goodness. Okay, our social media team has more great content like this on TikTok and Instagram, so please follow us at the handle CBS News. These two otters named Louie and Ophelia might as well be named Bonnie and Clyde. They're both on the run in Green Bay, Wisconsin after breaking out from a zoo during a winter storm. The Great Escape happened last week. They went through a hole in the fence at the new zoo and adventure park. And those North American river otters, yeah, they had quite a wild night, sliding around the fresh snow on their bellies. The zoo is on a mission to find them and set out traps and wildlife cameras. They've even added community members to keep a lookout. But the otters, well, they keep slipping away. Just this morning, the zoo shared this video showing one of the otters checking out the traps, but a raccoon set it off before the otter could go inside. My goodness, that's adorable in a way. We have much more ahead here on CBS News 24/7. We are unpacking the fallout from new reporting in The Atlantic after their editor-in-chief was added to a group chat on Signal and saw messages between top defense officials. Stay with us right here on CBS News 24/7. Have a great day, everyone.